The Zharkov research station floated in the void at the edge of the Oort cloud, a tiny island of light and warmth against the infinite blackness. Doctor Amara Singh gazed out the viewing port at the distant twinkle of Sol, lost in thought. She was jarred back to the present by a chime from her quantum entanglement communicator. Dr. Singh, please report to the main lab. The test is ready to begin. Amara took a deep breath and turned away from the tranquil view. It was time. The culmination of decades of research, planning, and sacrifice. Today, her team would attempt the impossible to extract zero-point energy directly from the quantum foam of spacetime itself. As she strode through the gleaming corridors of the research station, dodging scurrying maintenance bots and harried lab techs, Amara mentally reviewed the plan once more. If successful, zero-point extraction would revolutionize space travel, ending humanity's reliance on scarce antimatter for interstellar voyages. More than that, it had the potential to reshape the social and political landscape of the solar system. The great corporate houses that monopolized the antimatter trade would see their power crumble overnight. Upstart colonies and breakaway factions could spread to the stars unconstrained. The very foundations of the solar system's precarious balance of power would be shaken to the core, hence the secrecy. Hence locating the station in the remote fringes of the system, hidden from prying eyes. Hence the deadly security measures that guarded the research team's work. Amara herself had left everything behind on Earth to join this project, her career, her family, any hope of a normal life. But the prize was worth it. A new age for humanity. A future of limitless horizons. She entered the cavernous main lab, greeted by a flurry of activity. Her team, the best minds recruited from across the system, hurried to and fro, making final adjustments to the bewildering array of equipment that filled the space quantum field manipulators, negative energy condensers, gravitic lenses. At the center of it all squatted the extraction chamber itself. A perfect sphere of pure diamond several meters wide, shot through with pulsing conduits and flickering status displays. Her second-in-command, Dr. Yuri Zolkin, looked up from a holographic schematic and waved her over, his craggy face split by a grin. Amara, we're almost ready. Just recalibrating the Casimir field oscillators. If these readings are correct, it's really going to work. We're going to make history today. Amara returned his infectious smile, feeling a swell of pride. Thanks to your brilliant designs, Yuri. I have complete faith. Let's begin the pretest sequence. The moments that followed passed in a blur of frenzied but precise activity. One by one, each component and subsystem of the zero-point extraction array was brought online, humming with barely restrained power. The diamond sphere began to glow and pulse hypnotically. Field strength at 90% of critical threshold, announced Dr. Gana Mensa, eyes glued to her displays. Quantum fluctuations reaching desired range. Casimir cavities primed and ready. Amara nodded, adrenaline surging through her veins. Extraction team, confirm readiness. A round of affirmatives rang out. She took a deep breath, thumb poised over the initiate button, commencing zero-point energy extraction in 3, 2, 1. The world went white. For an eternal instant, Amara felt herself dissolving, her very atoms pulled apart by unimaginable forces as the diamond sphere blazed like a newborn star. Just as suddenly, reality crashed back in alarm shrieking, damage reports scrolling urgently across the screen. What happened? Amara shouted over the cacophony. Report. Yuri pulled himself up from the floor where the shockwave had hurled him, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. Some kind of massive power surge in the quantum flux regulator, he yelled back, frantically working his controls. Resonance cascade through the system. Safety interlocks kicked in, but his voice trailed off as he stared at his displays in disbelief. Amara rushed to his side, dread coiling in her gut as she took in the data. According to the sensors, nearly 80% of the zero-point energy they had extracted had simply vanished from the containment field in an eye blink. But that was impossible. The math didn't allow for Dr. Singh. Security alert, the voice of Station Chief Ulnar crackled urgently over the intercom. We have a perimeter breach, unknown intruders in the sublevels. They're headed your way. Amara shared a stunned look with Yuri. Intruders? Out here? But the trail of her thoughts was cut off as the lab doors exploded inward in a flash of burning plasma. Through the smoke, dark figures in sealed combat armor poured into the room, the muzzles of their weapons swiveling to cover the stunned scientists. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. Amara watched uncomprehendingly as a staccato of energy bolts stitched across the lab, cutting down her colleagues in sprays of blood and gore. Yuri jerked and fell, most of his head gone. She felt neither fear nor grief, only an abstract sense that she must be in shock. One of the intruders, his armor a more ornate design than the others, stepped forward through the carnage, a slim briefcase clutched in his hand. He stopped before the diamond sphere, now cracked and darkened, and opened the case. From within he withdrew a strange device, all sleek curves and flickering lights, and pressed it to the sphere's surface. With a rising hum, the device lit up, and Amara watched in numb astonishment as the zero-point energy they had labored so long to extract flowed out of the damaged containment field and into the waiting machine. In seconds, it was over. The intruder sealed the device back in its case and turned to face Amara. Up close, she could make out a stylized golden starburst emblazoned on his breastplate, the sigil of House Castron, one of the great corporate houses she had hoped to break with her research. The man regarded her coldly through his armor's faceplate. "Dr. Singh," he said, his voice distorted by his helmet speakers. "You have our sincere gratitude. The work you and your team have done here will not be forgotten. However, you must understand that we cannot allow such a disruptive technology to fall into the wrong hands. The stability of the solar system depends on the established order." Amara finally found her voice, and with it the embers of a cold, implacable fury. "You murdered my friends," she said slowly, tasting blood. "Butchered them. For what? So you can maintain your stranglehold on power? Suppress human progress?" The corporate soldier shook his head almost sadly. "An unfortunate necessity. As is this," he raised his weapon, the muzzle yawning black and hungry. Amara stared back without flinching, determined to deny him any satisfaction. The shot never came. The soldier's head snapped back, and he slumped bonelessly to the floor. A neat hole burned through his faceplate. His fellows swiveled to face this new threat, but too slow. A volley of pinpoint particle beam blasts scythed through their ranks, felling them like wheat before the reaper. Through the haze of smoke and death, a new figure emerged, clad in a battle-scarred combat exoskeleton festooned with all manner of exotic gear. Amara blinked uncomprehendingly at this unexpected savior, a hysterical laugh bubbling up in her throat. The newcomer retracted his helmet to reveal a lean, weathered face etched by years of hard living. "Dr. Singh?" "Commander Tycho Soren, Conclave Ranger Corps." He held up a battered Conclave sigil as proof. "Apologies for the dramatic entry, but looked like you could use a hand." Amara stared at him, struggling to make sense of this dizzying turn of events. The Conclave, the loose alliance of breakaway colonies and idealistic factions opposed to the corporate house's domination. Officially branded terrorists and enemies of stability. Why would they? "You're here for the zero-point energy," she said slowly. Realization dawning. "Just like House Castron." Soren shrugged, holstering his particle magnum. "I'll be straight with you, Doc. Yeah, the Conclave Council got wind of your breakthrough and sent me to secure it before the houses could. But," he held up a finger, "unlike our dear departed friends there, the Conclave doesn't want to hoard this tech for themselves. We want to share it. Make it available to everyone. Break the system open." Amara felt a sudden dizzying sense of unreality. Was this a rescue then? Or just another attempt to co-opt her work? Conflicting loyalties and decades-old convictions warred within her. Soren seemed to sense her hesitation. His eyes softened fractionally, and he extended a battle-gloved hand. "Hey, I get it. You didn't sign up for this cloak and dagger shit. You're a scientist, not a revolutionary. But your work could change everything. The Conclave isn't perfect, I know, but we're trying to build a better future out here. One where everyone gets a fair shake." He gestured at the device in Castran Soldier's briefcase. "That zero-point module there? It could power a ship to Alpha Centauri and back. A colony for decades. With that, the possibilities are limitless. The question is, who do you trust to use that power the right way?" Amara looked around at the broken bodies of her friends, the life's work they'd all sacrificed so much for. She thought of Earth, still under the thumb of the houses, of her family, who she hadn't spoken to in years, buoyance of the dream of a better future that had driven her out to the edge of the solar system in the first place. When she spoke, her voice was leaden with weariness, but there was an undercurrent of steel beneath. "If I do this, she said slowly. If I give you the 0-point module, I'm not just handing over a piece of tech. I'm choosing a side, throwing my lot in with the conclave and all that entails. You say you're fighting for a better future? Prove it. Swear to me that this will be used to help people, to share this breakthrough, not hoard it. Soren met her gaze squarely, a solemn intensity in his rugged features. Dr. Singh. Amara, I swear, by the stars and all I hold dear, the conclave will use this to break the corporate stranglehold and bring a new era of freedom and possibility to the system. You have my word, and the word of the council. This is bigger than any of us. A long, pregnant moment stretched taut between them, the weight of the decision hanging in the air. Then Amara sighed, feeling something give way inside her. All right then. Commander Soren, the 0-point module is yours. I'll brief you on its specifications. But I have terms. I'm coming with you. And when the time comes to build the future, I intend to have a say. Soren cracked a crooked grin and nodded, respect kindling in his eyes. Wouldn't have it any other way, Doc. Welcome to the revolution. He stooped to scoop the 0-point module from the dead Castron's hands. Now let's get the hell off this station before any more unpleasant surprises show up. We've got a long road ahead of us to get this back to conclave space, and I'm betting the houses will be howling for blood once they hear what happened here. Amara moved to gather what data and personal effects she could salvage, stepping numbly over the bodies of her fallen friends. A pang of bitter sorrow pierced the shell of her pragmatic resolve. So much death, so much sacrifice. But perhaps now it would mean something. She straightened, slipping a data crystal into her pocket, and turned to face Soren. I'm ready. Let's go rewrite the future. Together, the mismatched pair, rebel soldier and renegade scientist, made their way out of the shattered remnants of the lab and into the uncertain future they had just chosen. The 0-point revolution had begun, in blood and chaos, and the system would never be the same. As they raced through the emptied corridors of Zharkov station, emergency lights flashing and alarms blaring impotently, Amara felt a sense of grim purpose settle over her. Her life's work might have been co-opted, her team murdered, her safe, predictable existence snatched away, but now she had a higher calling. Soren led them unerringly through the labyrinthine guts of the station, consulting the glowing heads-up display in his battle helmet. Hangar deck, he grunted, rounding a corner at speed. I've got a stealth-rigged Corsair docked there. Should get us to the rendezvous point in one piece. Amara struggled to keep up, her legs burning and lungs heaving in the thin, recycled air. She'd spent so long in the lab, eschewing physical training in favor of intellectual pursuit. Now she cursed that neglect as Soren moved with the easy grace of a predator, his exoskeleton surface whirring. How did you infiltrate the station in the first place? She panted as they pounded down a long access tunnel studded with pipes and conduits. I thought our security was airtight. Soren barked a short laugh. No such thing as airtight, Doc. Not when you've got a man on the inside. At her shocked look, he shrugged apologetically. Yeah. The conclave has agents seated in a lot of places. How else do you think we've stayed one step ahead of corporate intelligence all these years? Speaking of, he slowed to a halt before a nondescript hatch, pulling a small device from his gear harness. Mole should have stashed my kit here before all hell broke loose. The device, some kind of scanner, played over the door and pinged affirmatively. Soren grinned and slapped the release, revealing a cramped utility nook. Amara watched in astonishment as he pulled a sleek rifle, bundles of spare power cells, and several nasty-looking chunks of ordnance from the concealed compartment. The easy familiarity with which he armed himself spoke to a life utterly removed from her experience. For the first time, she wondered if she'd leapt from the pan to the fire, trading one set of ruthless masters for another. As if sensing her unease, Soren shot her a reassuring look over his shoulder, slotting the last power cell into his rifle. I know how this must look, but believe me, we're the good guys here. The houses have had their jackboot on the system's neck long enough. Time for some real change. I want to believe that, Amara said, as they resumed their headlong flight, trying not to dwell on what real change might mean in practical terms. But right now, I just want to focus on getting this 0-point tech into the right hands. After that, there will be a lot of questions to answer. Soren nodded grimly, rounding another bend. You're not wrong. The council is going to have to, He broke off as a chime sounded in his helmet. Shit, they've found the bodies back in the lab. Station's going into lockdown. We need to move. No sooner had he spoken than a distant boom shook the deck, and the overhead switched to angry red. A calm, synthetic voice filled the air, cutting through the klaxons. Attention all personnel. Zharkov Station is now under emergency lockdown due to a security incident. Please remain where you are and await further instructions. Lethal countermeasures have been authorized. Lethal countermeasures, Amara asked numbly as they pounded through a communal nexus ringed by shocked faces. What did that entail? Soldiers? Combat drones? Probably hell on gas to start. Soren panted, urging her to even greater speed, sucking the air out of whole sections. Then the hunter-killers will deploy fast, armored, and utterly merciless. We do not want to be here when that happens. As if to punctuate his words, a shudder ran through the deck plates, and a sudden wailing filled the air. Blast doors began slamming shut throughout the ring corridor, sealing off sections, while atmosphere vented violently from overhead ducts. Zharkov Station was methodically severing its own limbs in an attempt to contain the infection. Amara and Soren barely made it through the next junction before the doors crashed shut with a boom that shook the teeth. The venting atmosphere howled like a caged demon, tugging at their clothes and hair. Their Soren roared over the noise, gesturing to a heavily reinforced hatch at the end of the corridor. The hangar deck. We're almost out of this tomb. Amara put her head down and sprinted for all she was worth, Soren hot on her heels. The shrieking gale threatened to lift her off her feet, and she could barely draw breath in the rapidly thinning air. Black spots danced in her vision, but she pushed through the pain, focusing on the hatch ahead. They hit the door at a stumbling run, Soren frantically working the control panel. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, with a groan of protesting hydraulics, the massive portal ground open. Soren half-dragged Amara through and hammered the close button. The hatch shuddered and started to shut, only to be blocked by a metallic tentacle lashing through the gap. Amara recoiled in horror as the segmented limb, tipped with a vicious claw, strained to widen the opening. Gah! Get to the ship, Soren snarled, drawing a glowing blade from his harness and hacking at the grasping appendage. Sparks flew and hydraulic fluid sprayed as he barely managed to sever the claw and kick the writhing stump back through the doorway. The hatch slammed shut with a resounding clang and Soren slapped a locking code into the panel. He turned to Amara, chest heaving. Hunter-killer. Damn thing must have been riding our wake through the ventilation system. Not the last we'll see of them, you can bet on that. Amara tore her gaze away from the ominous dent the drone's final lunge had left in the meter-thick door, taking in the cavernous hangar deck. Sleek ships crouched in their berths like raptors ready to take flight patrol craft, shuttles, maintenance pods. And there, skulking in the shadows at the far end, like a great predatory insect, a ship unlike any she'd seen before. Angular and matte black, it had the lean, hungry look of a military vessel, but without the bulk of armor or obvious weapon mounts. Soren caught her eye and grinned wolfishly. There's our ride. The Spectre-class stealth corsair. Pride of the Conclave fleet. That baby will get us through the interdiction grids and back to the rendezvous point, with nobody the wiser. I hope. You hope? Amara asked skeptically as they hurried across the deck, the echoing clang of their footsteps almost drowning out the distant booms and shudders of the station's death throes. Hey, no plan survives contact with the enemy, Soren quipped, keying a code into the Corsair's boarding hatch. But if there's one thing I'm good at, it's improvising. The airlock cycled open, and they clambered into the Spartan confines of the ship, Amara still clutching the precious zero-point module case to her chest. Soren sealed the hatch behind them and slid into the cockpit, hands dancing over the controls as he initiated a lightning-fast pre-flight sequence. Strap in, Doc, he called over his shoulder. This is going to be a bumpy ride. Amara barely had time to buckle herself into the co-pilot's crash harness before Soren slammed the throttle forward, and the Corsair leapt from its berth like an unleashed greyhound. The G-forces crushed her back into her seat as they hurtled down the launch tunnel, the hull creaking alarmingly. Soren, Amara queried nervously as the tunnel walls blurred past at dizzying speed. Are you sure we have clearance to? Her words were swallowed by a howl of hurricane winds as they burst from Zharkov Station's hull into the starry void beyond, the battered structure receding rapidly behind them. Soren let out a whoop of exhilaration, banking the craft hard to port and hammering the throttle to full military power. Clearance. Schmerance, he crowed. By the time traffic control knows what hit them, we'll be halfway to the belt. Now let's see what this baby can really do. The Spectre knifed through the void, its exotic drive trailing ghostly tachyon contrails as it accelerated to relativistic velocities. Amara watched in awe as the distant star's Doppler shifted and blurred, the sheer speed they were attaining almost incomprehensible. But their flight did not go unnoticed. Mere minutes after their explosive exit, Soren's console lit up with urgent telemetry. "Ah, ball, hell," he muttered, lips thinning. "We've got company. Castran gunships closing fast. They must have had pickets watching the station." Amara's blood ran cold. Castran gunships, sleek, predatory craft bristling with the latest in-house military tech. They'd carve the Spectre apart in moments if they closed to weapons range. "Can we outrun them?" she asked, hating the tremor in her voice. Soren shook his head grimly. "Not in a straight line. They've got the edge in raw thrust." But a sly grin split his craggy features. "They've got to catch us first." With that, he wrenched the control yoke into a dizzying spiral, the inertial compensators whining in protest. The Spectre corkscrewed and juked like a maddened hummingbird, the distant flares of the pursuing gunship struggling to match the impossible turns. Soren Amara yelped, her stomach lurching as the ship pulled yet another gut-wrenching maneuver. "What are you doing?" Improvising, the Ranger shot back, his eyes alight with manic glee. The Spectre's got a few tricks up her sleeve. Gravitic vectoring, inertial dampening, pseudo-random course changes, all to give the finger to attack solutions. He danced the agile craft through a dizzying array of evasive maneuvers, the gunship's probing particle beams stitching the void mere kilometers away. Amara clung to her harness, trying not to think about the titanic energies sleeting past the hull, a hair's breadth from annihilation. An urgent ping from the sensor panel drew Soren's gaze, and he swore vociferously. "Bastards are trying to head us off. They've got a light cruiser moving to cut off our escape vector." Amara frantically scanned the telemetry, her astrophysics training kicking in. Their flight path was taking them dangerously close to a dense asteroid field, the tumbling rocks presenting a lethal navigational hazard at these speeds. But if they tried to go around, they'd be easy prey for the closing cruiser. They were boxed in, unless... "Soren," she cried out, an insane plan crystallizing in her mind. "The asteroid field, it's our only chance." The Ranger shot her an incredulous look. "Are you nuts? At this velocity, those rocks will shred us like tissue paper. And that cruiser will vaporize us if we don't." Amara shot back, the adrenaline of utter desperation lending her voice steel. "The gunships won't be able to follow us through that snarl. It's our only shot." Soren held her gaze for a heart-stopping moment, searching her face for any hint of doubt. Then, finding none, he cracked a mad grin and wrenched the ship towards the deadly whirling maelstrom of rock. "Doc, you're crazier than I am," he laughed, hands flying over the controls as the Spectre streaked towards the treacherous field. "I like that in a woman." The next few minutes were a blur of sheer, pants-wetting terror as Soren jinked and juked the nimble craft through a hellish slalom, jagged chunks of nickel iron hurtling past the viewport close enough to scrape the hull. The inertial compensators screamed in agony, the ship shuddering and groaning around them as Soren pushed it to the very limit of its tolerances. Amara found herself mouthing fragments of half-remembered prayers from her childhood, her eyes welded shut, certain that each lurching hairpin turn would be their last. The Spectre danced a hair's breadth from oblivion, time and again, only Soren's godlike reflexes and the ship's incredible agility keeping them from being pulped against the tumbling debris. After an eternity that could only have been minutes, the bone-jarring shudders and stomach-churning jolts smoothed out. Amara dared to crack open one eye. The asteroid field was receding behind them, the Castran gunships nowhere to be seen. They had made it. "Ha," Soren crowed, his wild grin threatening to split his face. "Chew on that, you corporate bastards." He reached across to playfully punch Amara's shoulder, the adrenaline still thundering in both their veins. "Doc, that was some damn fine navigating. I knew there was a reason I liked you." Amara managed a weak smile, her muscles unclenching one by one as the magnitude of their escape sank in. They had done it. The zero-point module was safely out of Castran hands. For now, at least. But their flight was far from over. As the Spectre clawed for deep space in the prearranged rendezvous with the Conclave fleet, Amara knew this was only the beginning. The corporate houses would not take the loss of the module lying down. They would hunt Soren and her to the ends of the solar system to reclaim their prize. And beyond that, the greater struggle still loomed: the Conclave's long twilight war against the House's stranglehold on civilization. A war that had just entered a new and unpredictable phase with the addition of zero-point energy to the equation. Amara gazed out the viewport at the receding stars, feeling the weight of the future pressing down on her shoulders. So much death and destruction just to reach this point. So many sacrifices still to come. But for the first time in her life, she finally felt like she was right where she needed to be, in the depths of space, on the run, fighting for a cause greater than herself. With a rogue ranger by her side and the most revolutionary technology in human history in her hands, she couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope amid the fear and uncertainty. Maybe, just maybe, they actually had a chance to change things, to break the system once and for all, and build something better from the ashes. It was a slim hope, fraught with peril and pain, but it was more than she'd had in a long, long time. Amara leaned back in her acceleration chair, watching the twisting lights of hyperspace dance across the view screen, and let the exhaustion of the last harrowing hours tug her down into a dreamless sleep. There would be time to plan and scheme and worry in the days ahead. For now, she let herself rest, lulled by the thrum of the engines and the soft, steady breathing of the remarkable man beside her. Tomorrow, they would take the fight to the enemy once more. But tonight, in this moment of hard-won peace, amid the star-speckled void, Amara slept, and the galaxy held its breath, poised on the precipice of the life-altering change yet to come. As the Spectre sliced through the glittering expanse of deep space, Amara stirred from her fitful slumber. The adrenaline had faded, leaving a bone-deep weariness in its wake, but her mind was already racing ahead to the challenges to come. Soren, looking only slightly less haggard, offered her a wan smile as she unstrapped herself from the acceleration chair and drifted over to the co-pilot station. "Sleep well, Doc. We're about an hour out from the rendezvous point. The Conclave's forward fleet is already marshalling." Amara rubbed the grit from her eyes, trying to focus on the sensor readouts scrolling across her display. "Forward fleet? I thought the Conclave was mostly a loose confederation of colony worlds and rebel cells. I didn't realize they had that kind of military strength." Soren chuckled, though there was little humor in it. "There's a lot about the Conclave that stays under the radar. We've been building up our forces for years, waiting for the right moment to strike. With the zero-point module in our hands." He trailed off, the implications hanging heavy in the air between them. Amara nodded slowly, the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders once more. The technology she'd helped develop, that her friends had died for, could very well tip the balance in the Conclave's favor. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. "What will we do with it?" she asked softly, almost afraid to hear the answer. Soren was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with the burden of command. "We'll use it to end this war. To break the corporate stranglehold on the system and give people a chance to determine their own futures. No more indentured servitude on the colony worlds, no more forced labor in the asteroids, no more families broken apart by the House's greed." He turned to face her, his eyes burning with a fierce intensity. "But we'll do it the right way. Not by stooping to the House's level, but by being better than them. By showing the people of the solar system that there's another way. That's what the Conclave stands for, Amara. That's what we're fighting for." Amara held his gaze, searching his face for any hint of deception or fanaticism. But all she saw was a man who had dedicated his life to a cause he believed in with every fiber of his being. A man who, against all odds, she found herself trusting. "Okay," she said softly, reaching out to lay a hand on his arm. "I'm in, Soren, all the way. Let's finish this." The Ranger's face split into a fierce grin, his hand coming up to cover hers. "Glad to have you aboard, Doc. Now let's go win this war." The next hour passed in a blur of preparation and planning. Amara worked feverishly to integrate the zero-point module into the Conclave's existing tech base, while Soren briefed the fleet commanders on the daring strike they were about to undertake. The target was Chrysos Station, the nerve center of the corporate house's power in the solar system. From its heavily fortified position in Earth orbit, it served as both the seat of their governing council and the hub of their military might. If the Conclave could take Chrysos, it would deal a crippling blow to the house's hold on the system. But the station was a veritable fortress, bristling with enough firepower to lay waste to a small moon. A direct assault had always been out of the question. Until now. With the 0-point module powering their ships and weapons, the Conclave finally had a chance. It would be a desperate gambit, a roll of the dice with the fate of billions hanging in the balance. But it was a chance they had to take, as the ragtag rebel fleet dropped out of hyperspace on the fringes of Earth's gravity well. Amara felt a strange sense of calm settle over her. The die was cast, the pieces in motion. All that was left was to see it through to the end. Soren's voice crackled over the fleet-wide comm, steady and sure. All ships, this is Ranger 1. The time has come to break the chains of oppression and bring a new dawn to the system. Today we strike a blow for freedom that will be remembered for generations. Today we show the houses that their day of reckoning has finally arrived. A chorus of cheers and battle cries echoed across the channel as the Conclave ships surged forward, their hulls glinting in the distant light of the sun. At their heart, the Spectre darted and weaved, the precious 0-point module thrumming with barely contained power. Amara watched in awe as the sleek craft danced through the void, Soren's supreme skill making it seem almost alive. Ahead, the looming bulk of Chrysos Station swelled to fill the view screen, its gun-studded surface bristling with lethal menace. The houses had not been caught entirely unawares. Flights of keen-edged interceptors poured from the station's launch bays, their particle lances stabbing hungrily at the oncoming rebel fleet. Conclave ships died in gouts of flame and shattered metal, but still they pressed on, their numbers and desperate courage driving them forward. Amara flinched as a searing bolt of energy slashed past the Spectre's hull, the shields sizzling and crackling under the onslaught. Soren jinked and spiraled, his face a mask of concentration as he threaded the deadly needle of the Chrysos defenses. All around them, the battle raged with a savage fury, ships clashing and dying in a cataclysmic display of raw, destructive might. But the Conclave's assault was relentless, driving ever closer to the heart of the house's power. And at the tip of the spear, the Spectre hurtled through the maelstrom, the 0-point module pulsing with an unearthly radiance. Amara felt the hair on the back of her neck stand on end as Soren keyed the final activation sequence, the ship thrumming with barely restrained power. "Brace yourself, Doc," he yelled over the scream of overstressed engines. "It's going to be one hell of a ride." Amara gripped the arms of her chair until her knuckles turned white, her heart hammering in her chest. This was it. The moment of truth. With a blinding flash and a bone-jarring shockwave, the Spectre released the pent-up energy of the 0-point module in a single, devastating burst. A lance of pure, unbridled power stabbed out from the ship's prow, searing through the void with an intensity that made the sun seem like a flickering candle. It struck Chrysos Station dead center, the fortress-like structure vanishing in an instant of pure white light. Amara squeezed her eyes shut against the glare, a primal cry wrenching from her throat as the shockwave buffeted the ship like a leaf in a hurricane. When the blinding radiance finally faded, Amara dared to open her eyes once more. Where Chrysos Station had loomed only moments before, there was nothing. Only a slowly dissipating cloud of glowing plasma and drifting debris, the shattered remnants of the house's once unassailable stronghold. For a long, stunned moment, the solar system seemed to hold its breath, every ship, every soul, frozen in a tableau of utter disbelief. Then, like a dam bursting, the Conclave fleet erupted into wild cheers and jubilant cries of victory. They had done it. Against all odds, they had struck a blow that would echo through the annals of history. The reign of the corporate houses was over. A new chapter for humanity had begun. Amara felt a hand close over hers, and she turned to see Soren smiling at her, his eyes bright with triumph and something more. "We did it, Amara. We really did it. Your work, your sacrifice. It made this possible." She returned his smile, feeling the weight of the past lift from her shoulders at long last. The losses, the pain, the long years of toil and struggle. It had all been worth it for this moment. "No, Soren," she corrected gently, twining her fingers with his. "We did it, all of us. The Conclave, my team. And you. This victory belongs to all of us. The ranger's grin turned sly, his eyes sparkling with mischief. Well then, I guess we better get started on figuring out what kind of future we want to build together. The real work is just beginning. Amara laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. I suppose it is. But for now, let's just enjoy this moment. We've earned it. As the Spectre drifted amid the jubilant conclave fleet, the wreckage of Chrysos Station slowly cooling behind them, Amara leaned back in her chair and let the magnitude of their accomplishment wash over her. It wouldn't be easy, building a new and better system from the ashes of the old. There would be challenges and setbacks, new enemies to face and old wounds to heal. But for the first time in her life, Amara felt truly hopeful for the future. With Soren by her side, the brilliant minds of the Conclave at her back, and the power of the zero-point technology at their fingertips, anything seemed possible. A new age had dawned, and Amara couldn't wait to see what wonders and adventures it would bring. As the rebel ship set course for the Conclave's hidden stronghold, the first step on the long road to a brighter tomorrow, Amara closed her eyes and let the thrum of the engines lull her into a peaceful, dreamless sleep. There would be time for planning and rebuilding later. For now, she savored the sweet taste of hard-won victory and the even sweeter promise of a future where anything was possible. A future that she and Soren, that all of the Conclave, would forge together. A future of freedom, of hope, of limitless potential. It was a future worth fighting for. And fight for it they would, until the last shackle of the old order was broken and humanity was free to chart its own destiny among the stars. With that final thought, Amara drifted off into a contented slumber, the first light of a new dawn breaking over the curve of the Earth far below. The zero-point revolution had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.